30 seconds. We're just going to give everyone a chance to get into the room.
Thank you so much for setting all this up. Thanks for having me back again. Always helpful to be able to be here, just be a resource, to be able to answer things as possible, and try and help out as many people as humanly possible through this entire process. It's been an interesting one that we've learned so far. We've learned a lot of lessons at this point in time over the last few weeks, 6 weeks at this point in time. We've seen what's worked well for our clients, what's not worked well for our clients. There was about 100 or so clients that wanted us to manage the entire process for them, front to back, and so of those clients, we had all of them ready to go and all the information ready to file with the lender by before Monday morning, before it opened up. And as of last night, about 25% of them have already been funded at this point in time. So we're super excited about that. Excuse me. I've already been received their E-Tran numbers from the SBA, so they've got their funds locked in at this point in time. So we'll see what happens. And we're as a whole, our client base is seeing a lot better results with the smaller community-based lenders as opposed to the large banks. Large banks, I think, are definitely doing a lot better in the middle market type businesses. So the businesses that are, I'd say, the greater upper number of employees, a higher number of employees, just because there's more dollars in it for the big banks is my guess there. But so we're seeing some good results for our clients at this point in time. Like I said, about 25% of them that we had ready to go and teed up and ready to submit by to the banker to submit starting on Monday have already secured their E-Tran number from the SBA. So they're going to be able to fund at any point in time. And when they hopefully starting next week, we've got clients all over the entire country. Some of them are going back as early as Monday. A lot of them are going back middle of May. Some of them are not going back until June. So we'll find out and see what happens over the course of the next 6 to 8 weeks or so. So one question here is, I received my PPP loan just today. How long do I have to use the funds, and when does the first disbursement have to be made? So it's a fantastic question. So ultimately, if you received your PPP authorization number today, what's called the E-Tran number, that's essentially the number that's associated with your loan in the SBA system. That's what locks your funds in to make sure that they're your funds, that you're going to receive those funds from your bank. And the bank has 10 days, or you have 10 days, to work with the bank in order to sign your promissory note, sign your loan documents. And at that point in time, then they're usually the day after or within a couple of days, maybe even the same day, providing you the funds. And the date that you get those funds is the date that your loan forgiveness time frame starts. So let's say that you get them on Friday, on May 1st. 8 weeks from this Friday, on May 1st, is the end of your 8-week time frame. But your 8-week time frame would start on the date that you receive the funds from the bank, which in that example was May 1st. So hopefully that answered your question in terms of how long do we have to use the funds, 8 weeks, and when does the bank have to disperse them within 10 days. So. And then, can I pay myself on a draw from the PPP loan even though it was not part of the original calculation? That's a fantastic question. There's a lot more that goes into that question than we can even cover today. There's a lot of technical requirements and a lot of planning that needs to be taken into consideration. I would highly recommend you reach out to your CPA. Hopefully they've been following and hopefully they've been studying up and know and understand what this process looks like and what all is going to go into that. But you want to work with them in order to really make sure that you're using the funds wisely. So sorry, I can't answer that question whether or not you can pay yourself a draw even though that it was not part of the original loan calculation. I would also wonder why it was not part of the original loan calculation. Was the original loan calculation done properly or not? Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. But take that into consideration. Work with your CPA to really figure out what makes sense there. So, okay. So, Can a sole proprietor pay themselves and qualify for forgiveness? That's a fantastic question. So theoretically speaking, yes, you absolutely could be up to $8,333 a month, which is the equivalent of $100,000 total compensation. Now, the SBA, or the Treasury actually, has not yet issued guidance on what the official steps are going to be and what the official details are going to be for that loan forgiveness aspects, and what is going to go into that 8-week time frame in order to make sure that every dollar qualifies. So we're definitely hazy and hesitant on spending money that doesn't absolutely have to be spent right now if you've received your PPP funds already. But in theory, the way that the CARES Act is written up, that you as a sole proprietor would and should be able to pay yourself up and qualify for up to $8,333 a month in loan forgiveness, or in the amount of a loan that will be forgiven. Now, again, we don't know how they're going to measure that. We don't know if if it's going to go up based on net income for that time frame, because if your practice is closed, right, you've still got the expenses. But if your practice is closed and you don't have the revenue, then as a sole proprietor, you're not going to have net income in order to be considered for forgiveness. So we don't know. We don't 100% know. We're waiting for the guidance from the Treasury to answer these specific detail level questions. In theory, the answer is yes, but I would hold on at this point in time. I would not pay yourself yet. I would wait for the Treasury guidance on that and go from there. So next fantastic question is the mortgage rent payment part of the 75% of payroll dollars. So think about it. Your payroll dollars are what's meant to pay the employees and yourself as an employee, or yourself as a self-employed individual, right? That's only going to be payroll. It's only going to be health insurance. It's only going to be retirement funds. It's only going to be other expenses as it directly relates to payroll payment of employees and you as an employee or as a self-employed individual. The mortgage and rent payments, that's going to fall in the other bucket, right? 25% of proceeds that can be spent on other items. That's what your mortgage and rent payment. It's not, your mortgage and rent is not payroll. Payroll pays your employees. Mortgage and rent is paying your mortgage and rent. It's going to be in the other category. I've not received my PPP yet, but assuming I do before my opening date, how do I maximize the loan forgiveness? That's a fantastic question. One that we're still waiting on the Treasury to provide guidance for. We're not 100% sure yet as to how to maximize it, because we don't know the rules that we're going to, all the detail of the rules that we're going to have to play within. So unfortunately, frustratingly, irritatingly, right now it's a game of hurry up and wait. The Treasury is supposed to release guidance this week. They've not yet. And so we're hoping that it's going to come any day now. And I do imagine once that guidance comes, it's probably going to be clarified 2 or 3, 4, 10, 20 other additional times over the course of the next month, which is what it's there for. It's why it's an initial interim guidance. And then they're going to provide future full Q&A and further guidance as questions and issues arise there. So we don't 100% know. Nobody 100% knows how to maximize loan forgiveness. We can look at it from a 30,000-foot overview and make assumptions, but that's all they are at this point is kind of educated guesses, assumptions, and a lot of speculation. So I would not spend money at this point in time that you would not ordinarily spend if your office is closed and not open. I would not spend the money at this point in time that you don't absolutely have to. So, okay, and then I'm confused if the number of employees put back on payroll or if the 75% of payroll amount is more important. That's a fantastic question. They're both important. Again, we don't know the details of the dates and the time frames in which they're going to be important, nor are we 100% certain without a shadow of a doubt as to if the 75% rule for forgiveness applies to the total loan proceeds, meaning your 100% of your loan taken out, or if it refers to only the amount of dollars that were actually spent out of the loan taken out. So so as an example, if your loan was $200,000 and you only spent $100,000, we don't know if that 75% mark is based on the $200,000 loan proceeds, or if it's based on the $100,000 that you actually spent. So hopefully the Treasury will hurry up and provide some guidance, because there is, people all over, dentists all over the country that are just frustratingly and diligently waiting and hoping that we can figure this out here sooner than later. That way we know exactly what needs to happen and be able to go from there. Okay, so fantastic question. Thank you so much. If we're unable to use 75% on payroll and can only use 50%, will that 50% be forgiven? And the question is, we don't know, and that's goes back to before we talked about having the Treasury needing to issue specific guidance. Essentially what you're asking is that if there's 75% to use on payroll, but you can only use 50% of it, whether or not it means that you're going to be able to have that 50% be forgiven, or 50% of what you use be forgiven. And we need the details of the forgiveness aspect from the Treasury to be able to really answer that question. And we just don't have it yet. They're late at this point in time to be able to provide it to us. So we're hopeful that it's going to come any day now, but we're not 100% sure. So next question is, I applied with Wells Fargo and I haven't heard from them. You, like so many other people, what we're seeing, have applied at these larger banks, right? The mega banks, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, U.S. Bank, Chase Bank is another one that I keep hearing all kinds of people frustrated with. They've put their name in the bucket, right? Their name in the ring and in the queue, and they've not heard back from them. So yesterday I heard from somebody that Bank of America had something like 180,000 applications to process, which is just an astronomical amount of applications to work through. And keep in mind, every one of these applications has to be submitted manually through an SBA E-Tran portal login by a human being. And so every one of these banks that has one login or 20 logins or 100 logins, they're limited as to the number of accounts or number of applications they can process at any given time, because every one of them has to be manually entered into the SBA E-Tran system. And that's why we're seeing community banks are doing a much better job with our clients and helping them secure their E-Tran authorization number in order to make sure that their funds are secured and locked in and allocated and earmarked for our clients, for you as a dentist. We're not seeing it as great of luck. I don't think we've seen anybody get approved by the large mega banks at this point in time. They're all been through the small community banks or regional bank. We're having great luck with regional banks. But what we are recommending for our clients who, had applied with PNC or applied with Chase or Bank of America or Wells Fargo or U.S. Bank is to use an alternative fintech company like Lendio or Bluevine or PayPal in order to put in a second application, because those fintech brokers are essentially partnering with smaller banks across the country that have the ability to have excess capacity to be able to queue up more applications and run them through their E-Tran system and book the loans on their books. And so that's a fantastic opportunity to be able to find a bank that's across the country that might have some excess capacity. But also what I would do is I would look and say, okay, do I have any accounts whatsoever or any relationships with a community bank in my area? And if you do, reach out to them and find out if you can apply through them, because it increases your chances astronomically to apply through a community bank or a credit union as opposed to one of these mega banks. So hopefully that answered your question there. Let's see here. Okay, so I originally applied for the EIDL loan on March 20th. On March 31st, I received an email to apply for the grant using the short form. No response since then. I attempted to check the status. Message stated that my application was received, but I needed to complete a self-certification at SBA.gov. There's no information on that page to proceed. Feeling lost. Yeah, that's so on March 20th, that would have been Friday, and the short form system went live, which really the short form system is only it's just a way of collecting basic information in order to put everybody into a queue to eventually be contacted. And we did hear from somebody at the SBA yesterday that once you've received the grant dollars, once the grant's been directly deposited into your account, then it should be somewhere between 3 and 4 weeks that the SBA would then reach out to you and connect with you after that for any kind of further discussion or further inquiry. So we're hoping that here probably in the next week or two, we'll start to see some more further movement on the economic injury disaster loans for some of our clients. We have had some clients that have heard from the SBA at this point in time, and those clients had all filled out the long form method. So they submitted, I think it was 6 or 7 pages of application with supporting data in a long form via fax or email or a Dropbox to the SBA. We've seen those clients receive anywhere from a $15,000 loan from the SBA, an economic injury disaster loan, to I believe our largest one at this point that we've seen is $600,000. And the economic injury disaster loans are all 3.75% interest rate, no payments for 12 months, a 30-year amortization term with no prepayment penalties. And so if you do hear from the SBA for the economic injury disaster loan program, if you filled out the short form, then I would expect, and you've received the grant money, I would expect to see or hear from the IRS or from the SBA, excuse me, hopefully somebody sometime in the 3 to 4, 5 weeks after you've received the grant money in your account. That's what we heard from the SBA yesterday. So hopefully that's true. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. But in terms of complete self-certification at the SBA.gov, no information on that page to proceed. You're going to have to reach out to the SBA directly and find out what needs to happen, what you need to do, what's going on, where the hang up is here. Maybe they're having a website issue. Maybe there's a connection issue on your end, connecting to it somehow, connecting to the right page. They've had lots and lots and lots of technology issues with the volume of information, the volume of transactions that have been going through their systems. So there's a distinct possibility it's that. But probably the best thing that you're going to be able to do is reach out to the SBA if you're not able to get past wherever they recommended and find out what the skinny and what the deal is there. So hopefully that answers your question. I received my PPP loan next week and employees want to stay on unemployment. Do we have until June 30th to rehire every staff member back? Can we wait with some employees and still get forgiveness? So that's a fantastic question. So there is a June 30 bright line date that as long as you've restored employment by June 30, then you're not going to be that test for forgiveness would be met. That there's multiple tests that are at a very high level laid out for loan forgiveness. That's one of them, that you had to have had your employment at February 15th restored by June 30th. So there definitely is a test there. Now, because you receive your PPP loan next week, doesn't mean your office is going to be open next week. And so I would definitely take into consideration whether or not you're going to pay your employees out of your PPP funds if your office is not yet open. So I would not pay them out of your PPP funds on full-time payroll unless their office is open and they're back working. I would leave them on unemployment for that time frame, especially because we don't know at this point in time what the Treasury guidelines, the details of the Treasury guidelines are going to be in order to receive loan forgiveness for the PPP loan. So it's better to err on the side of caution and rather than to spend the money and not receive the forgiveness back. That's my personal opinion anyway. Okay, so next question. I was planning on retiring by the end of the year and selling my practice. Will this impact anything with the PPP loan? No, not at all. Not at all. If you're planning on retiring and selling your practice later this year, keep in mind your PPP loan is only going to be for an 8-week period starting at the date that you receive the funds. So once you receive your ETRAN number, you have 10 days to sign your loan documents and receive the first fund distribution from the bank, right? To receive your money from the bank. Once you've received your money from the bank, that kicks off an 8-week window that you have to utilize the funds, to spend the funds within. And then whatever happens in that 8-week window, that's what's then going to be reported back to the SBA whenever you fill out another application and ask for them to forgive your loan. And so hopefully no hiccups there, and hopefully that your loan is forgiven. At least most of it is forgiven. Any kind of balance that's left that you have to pay back once you go to sell your practice, you'll just have to pay that back out of the proceeds, or pay it back before you list your practice or sell your practice, and everything will sell free and clear of any kind of liens or loans, and so you won't have any issue there whatsoever. Won't negatively impact you in any way, shape, or form. So, okay. Okay, next question. Are most of your clients who are receiving their PPP loans bringing back their staff even though they are not seeing patients? No. Most of our clients who are receiving their PPP loans are following our advice at this point in time to wait, to hold off, to put the funds in a totally separate bank account dedicated for the PPP funds, so that way it's easy to track what the money was spent for, easier for you to track what the money is spent for. They're not utilizing it to bring back employees full-time while their office is closed and not seeing patients, especially when they don't know yet when their office is going to be open. We have clients in certain parts of the country, that know for sure they're going to be open starting next Monday. And so what they've done is they've brought their team back early to clean the office, to call and schedule patients, to clean up their practice management software, to spend the time, to spend some time going through and making sure that the practice management software has all the emails and mobile numbers, and following up with patients in order to make sure things are correct, following up on accounts receivable balances, et cetera, et cetera. So you'll maybe have come in a week earlier than what they would have expected to otherwise in order to just do some of these housekeeping things. So there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever, but I would say that they're not paying them to sit at home while the office is closed out of the PPP funds. That I would definitely not do that if it were me. Okay. Can you use money to fund retirement? So PPP loan funds can be used for payroll-related costs. 75% of the proceeds, is the way the Cares Act is written, 75% of the loan proceeds has to be used in order to fund payroll-related costs. One of the payroll-related costs is retirement funding. Now, what that means when it gets down to the granular detail, we're not 100% sure yet, because we're waiting on the SBA, or excuse me, the Treasury, to provide the proper guidance for us to be able to use and know. But what we do know is that when you're taking into consideration the information in the calculations and the monthly average, is that retirement expense absolutely was one of the items that we took into account for the clients that we did the calculations for. Now, as it relates to what types of retirement accounts, 401k, the employer profit share, employer non-elective or matching contribution. We took into consideration the profit sharing contribution if that happens on a regular basis, and those of our clients that have a cash balance plan, we also took that expense into account as well. And so what we envisioned is probably going to end up happening, and what the Treasury is going to provide guidance on, is that you'll probably be able to take 8 50-seconds, so a calculation of 8 weeks divided by 52 weeks, right? So that 8-week period, 8 50-seconds of your annual retirement expense for those three things: the safe harbor non-elective or the match, the profit sharing, and the cash balance plan. 8 50-seconds of those retirement vehicles, dollars spent on those retirement vehicles, and use that and pay that out of these PPP funds. We fully expect that to happen. We can't imagine that they're going to say that you can't use that when you could use it on the front end to get the loan to begin with. So, fantastic question. Thank you so much for that question. That's a great one. Okay, so if our overall 75% of payroll is satisfied for forgiveness, Is it individual staff 75%? 3 doctors, salary, paying out vacation, sick leave, 4 weeks of pay for staff. Does the individual staff 75% pay have to be satisfied as well, given the wage is not reduced? Paying staff 4 weeks instead of 6 weeks. So that is, so if our overall 75%, so you can't, so the way that it's written, it's not only that 75% of the proceeds must be used for payroll costs, there also is that you cannot have a greater than 25% reduction of compensation for any employee that earns under $100,000 a year. So when I say that, meaning let's say that somebody makes $99,999 a year, right? And so they're not going to, they're under that 100,000 mark, meaning that they're going to be taken into consideration whenever it looks at the amount of payroll that you've paid. And if you've paid them 70% of that $99,999 annualized salary, that means you're going to be in trouble when it comes to your forgiveness aspect. So I think the answer to your question is you have to take into account you can't just pay everybody else and then pay the staff 4 out of 6 weeks, because it doesn't meet the 75% mark or the 25% reduction of their compensation mark. I think what you're probably going to have to make sure is that there's not a reduction of more than 25% of their particular compensation. But again, that's speculation, and until we get the Treasury rules and the guidance as to the details on how these rules and how these overarching theory and guidance and the way that the CARES Act is written, we're not going to 100% know the answers to that level of a detail of a question. But you cannot reduce employee compensation if they earn less than $100,000. You cannot reduce it by more than 25% and still qualify for forgiveness. So that's something you got to take into consideration there. Okay, so question is somebody in California that had received their, I assume received their funding yesterday. I got my loan yesterday. I'm in California. There's a stay and shelter. Stay and shelter laws are in place until June 1st. Of course, so got my loan yesterday. I'm in California, and stay and shelter laws are in place until at least June 1st. So that's going to be a month from now, right? And so if you've got your funds yesterday, your 8-week time frame started yesterday. That's the point in time where your 8-week time frame started. So any money that you spend between now and the end of your 8 weeks would be eligible for forgiveness, assuming that you follow all the rules and guidelines, which includes that you have to restore your employees to full employment by June 30th. And so we're right up against the wire that your 8 weeks is not going to quite stretch to June 30th. It's going to fall just shy of that. So that's something to take into consideration. But even if I start by June 1st, I will probably use the funds till the end of July. Is that going to be a problem? Yes, that's going to be a problem. Your 8 weeks starts yesterday whenever you received your loan, assuming that means that's the day you received your funds. The 8 week starts the day you receive your funds, and it carries forward 8 weeks from that date. And so you don't have 8 weeks from the date that you go back and start, your office opens back up. You have 8 weeks from the day you received your funds. And so if your office is closed for 4 weeks, the next 4 weeks, you're going to have a hard time using 8 weeks worth of funds in 4-week time frame, because you're less than a 4-week time frame, because your time frame stops. Your 8 weeks stops 8 weeks after the date that you received your fund. You're not going to be able to use them into July. So that's a fantastic question, but you're only going to be able to use them within that 8-week time frame of when you received your funds. Okay, so we've got approved for the PPP. So now what? Can you go through recommended process of how to move forward with hiring, etc.? Yeah, so that's a fantastic question. So if you've been approved for the PPP loan and you've not received your funds, you've got 10 days from the date of your E-Tran authorization number, the date that you received your E-Tran authorization, in order to sign your paperwork, and also from that point in time to receive your first funds disbursement. Now, to do that, I would recommend stretching it out as long as possible. So call it day 8 or day 9, right, from of the 10 days, in order to make sure that your 8 weeks starts as late as humanly possible. And so from that date that you receive the funds, at that point in time, what happens in the next 8 weeks is what matters for your loan forgiveness. Now, the plan's going to be different whether your office is open or closed, whether you're seeing patients or you're not seeing patients. All of that needs to be taken into consideration whenever you're determining how to use the funds and what strategy to best implement at this point in time, or at that point in time, I guess I should say. But let's say that your office, you're going back and starting to see patients next week, then effectively, you'll once you receive your funds, you're going to bring on everybody back just as you were before the office was closed, without any reduction in force whatsoever, in order to make sure that you don't run astray from the forgiveness aspects of the loan, the high-level forgiveness aspects of the loan. We don't know all the details yet. At the very high level, we know you can't have less than a 25% reduction in what was happening on February 15th of this year. So you have to take that into consideration. But if your office is closed, we would, at this point in time, without knowing all the rules to play within, the details of the rules that we have to play by, we'd recommend that you just hold off and wait and sit on the money, keep it in a separate account, let it sit there for now. Wait on that guidance to be issued. And once that guidance is issued, then a plan can be put into place as to what makes sense or what doesn't make sense. That's a fantastic question. Thank you so much. Okay, so it was my understanding that we have to use PPP funds by 6/30/2020. So if we get a loan funded on 6/1, does that mean I have until the July's end and still get forgiveness? Yes, you don't have to use the funds by 6/30. 6/30 is the date that you have to restore full employment by in order to be eligible for the loan forgiveness. And so you have 8 weeks from the date that you received your funds to use them. So in your case, if you get your loan funded on June 1st, as an example, 8 weeks from June 1st is what you would have to use your funds. I've applied for the EIDL on 4/6, and until now I haven't received anything yet. Does this mean I'm not approved? What should I do? Let's see, 4/6 Monday, so the week after. Okay, so ultimately 4/6, you're about a week later than a lot of other people were for the short form application. Doesn't mean you're not approved for anything. That just means they haven't got to you yet. We don't know whether you'll be approved or not. So what to expect to happen, and just with everybody else, the EIDL loan, the economic injury disaster loan, once the short form was filled out, the contact form to open your case with the SBA. Once your case was opened with the SBA, they took that information, and once your case was assigned to basically an SBA loan officer, then at that point in time is when they then did the disaster grants. The $1,000 per employee up to $10,000 is what that disaster loan, the economic injury disaster loan grant portion was. And then we heard from the SBA, I believe it was yesterday, that they're expecting somebody to then reach out somewhere between 3 and 5 weeks after you received your grant money, is what their goal is, to be able to contact you to further discussion, request further information, hash out the details of your economic injury disaster loan, your actual loan. So nobody that we're aware of that we work with right now, no client of ours has received the economic injury disaster loan, the actual loan that has filled out the short form to open their case with the SBA. Lots of our clients have received the grant at this point in time. Significant portion of them that has received the grant at this point in time, but nobody has received the actual loan. The only clients of ours that have received the loan, the actual loan, that we've seen somewhere between $15,000 and $600,000 of the actual economic injury disaster loans going to some of our clients, but they all filled out the multiple pages, sent in the supporting information of the old long form, and got that all submitted into the SBA previous to 4/6, the week of, it had to have been the week previous to, March 15th-ish. The SBA's computer program crashed. Maybe it was by the 21st it crashed. So they submitted it between the 22nd and the 28th of March in the long form version. Those are the only clients that have heard back from the SBA yet on the EIDL loans at this point in time. Lots of people have got the grants. Those are the only people who have heard back on the actual loans at this point in time. Okay, so next question. I did apply for the PPP through Chase, but can I apply to another bank? Chase we've heard. Can I apply to another bank? Chase has taken forever. Absolutely. Unfortunately, Chase, and just like every other mega bank, all the other mega banks out there have not done as great of a job for clients as the smaller community banks have. So we're absolutely recommending, one, if you've got any relationship with a community bank whatsoever, that's going to be your best bet. But outside of that, I would go to a fintech program, Lindio, Bluevine, PayPal, Cabbage, and apply through one or maybe even all of those if you wanted to spend the time, effort, and energy to do it. Okay. So here's a great question we've heard for multiple questions. Can I rehire different people if my employees don't want to come back? The answer to that, as far as we know, right? Again, as far as we know today, it doesn't matter what person you hire. You just have to restore the number of people that you were paying on payroll. So for instance, you've got somebody that quit on March 10th, right? And so they had quit before the office even shut down, and they're not coming back because they had already quit, but they were employed on February 15th, and you'll have to refill their position, rehire somebody in their stead by June 30th. Fantastic question. If I understand. So here's another question. If I understand correctly, I have to disperse my funds within 10 days of me receiving my funds, my PPP funds from the bank. So no, that you don't understand that correctly. Let me clarify that for you. So the bank has to disperse the bank's funds to you within 10 days of receiving your SBA E-Tran number, your authorization number from the SBA. So you have 8 weeks to use the money from the date you receive the funds. The bank has 10 days, 10 calendar days, is our understanding, in order to disperse those funds to you, which at that point in time kicks off your 8 weeks that you have to spend the funds with. Fantastic question. Okay, question, if my bank has no details on note about forgiveness, but specifies it as the SBA PPP loan, I assume it defaults the SBA guidelines for forgiveness and who administers the forgiveness, the bank or the SBA. Fantastic questions. Yeah, nobody has the details on the note forgiveness yet because the Treasury has not submitted it at this point in time, has not released the guidelines yet. And so we're fully, no bank out there has any level of granular detail about the loan forgiveness, other than we know that the bank themselves are going to take the initial forgiveness application that hasn't even been generated or created yet, along with all the supporting documentation for every dime that you spent in that 8-week period. The bank itself is going to look at it first, give its first level of approval, then they're going to ship it all off to the SBA. The SBA is then going to have 60 days to respond to you and let you know whether or not they're going to approve your forgiveness or not. So that's the high level detail about all we know at this point in time as it comes to the SBA loan forgiveness, who's going to administer it, how it's going to work, et cetera, et cetera. If I pay my staff, can that be used for PPP? Yep. So staff bonus. If I pay my staff a bonus, yes, absolutely. So you can pay your staff a bonus. It's going to be covered under the payroll expense. It's a payroll cost. We're not aware of any max at this point in time yet, other than the overall compensation max of annualized no more than $100,000 a year annualized. So no more than $8,333 per month. Okay, so I received an email from my bank saying I received a PPP loan from the SBA. How long can I wait before I accept or sign? You have 10 days. You have 10 days to accept and sign and receive your funding. And your E-Tran number is what secures that funding for you specifically. Can PPP supplies be bought with the PPP loan? That's a tongue twister right there. So no, you can only use the PPP loan proceeds on payroll costs, rent, utilities, mortgage interest. You can't buy dental supplies. You can't buy gloves and masks, face masks and body armor, or your swimming pool in your backyard, or anything like that. You can only use it specifically for those very specific items. And if you use it for other things, you can get in big trouble. It specifically says in the final interim guidance that willful use of PPP funds for non-eligible items, meaning not payroll costs, not rent, not utilities, and not mortgage interest or loan interest prior to February 15th, that it can come with very harsh, including criminal penalties. So I would do not use it for anything other than those very specific items. If I can, should I postpone paying rent until I can do it with the PPP loan money? We don't know what the guidance is going to say in terms of whether or not you can pay back bills with the PPP funds and have it be forgiven. So what we're anticipating is that it's going to have to be earned, right? It's going to have to be incurred and paid in that time frame, meaning that you're going to get 2 months of rent payments that you can have forgiveness for, meaning that you can have 8 weeks of payroll, meaning that you're going to have 8 weeks of retirement expenses, 8 weeks of healthcare costs, that you're not going to be able to stuff 6 months worth of rent into that 8-week time frame, whether back rent or rent and paid in advance. So that's what we're imagining is going to happen here. If my PPP application is still in review with one bank, should I apply with another bank? Yeah, there's no harm, no foul. It's a matter of if you want to take the time to do it, you certainly could. We're seeing that lots of people, especially if you're with a big bank, absolutely. If you're with a big bank, go to a community bank, go to a fintech. Lindio, Bluevine, PayPal, Cabbage are the ones that we're seeing. Most people are utilizing at this point. We've had very smooth processes to get going. So if you're with a big bank, absolutely. Is there a date that you have to keep the employees on to be eligible for forgiveness? You have to have them past June 30th. And so June 30th is the date in which your employment has to be restored to the point in time where it was at February 15th, 2020 in order to be eligible for forgiveness. For sure. Should we deposit the PPP funds into a separate bank account? I would highly recommend that you deposit your PPP funds into a separate bank account and you only use it for those expenses. Payroll costs, including healthcare and retirement, that you only use it for rent, utilities, and mortgage interest that you have to pay. Okay. Can the other 25% be spent on supplies and equipment? No, you can only use it on those specific items if you want to stay out of hot water with the SBA and the Treasury. The government is not who I would want coming after me for misuse of funds. So, okay, so can I calculate K1 distribution into Dr. Salary S Corp for the PPP up to $100,000? No, it can only be used payroll 100%. If you're an S corporation and you paid yourself less than $100,000 in a trailing 12 months, either in 2019 or the trailing 12 months ending at February 28th or March 31st, you're out of luck. Can't use the K1 distribution, K1 income or distributions for that calculation. Do you have any experience getting a benefit from office interruption insurance? That's big topic that's been in the news. Is first off, that most of these plans, most of these office interruption, business interruption insurance plans and policies specifically exclude pandemics. There is some that include pandemics that are, one, really old, two, really expensive, but they're, I'd 99% of them, probably 99.9, maybe even arguably, do not include or specifically exclude pandemic coverage. So I think the ADA maybe said to file a complaint or file a claim on your business interruption policy, but the chance of you actually getting any dollars from that business interruption policy are basically zero, so don't expect anything from it. But but you could try. Okay, so the bank I applied for my PPP did not calculate my amounts requested correctly. I reached out to them if they don't reply. Can I apply to another bank? So we're seeing a lot of clients and a lot of dentists that have relied on the bank to calculate the PPP amounts and submit their application. Even a lot of dentists that we've seen that calculated their own amounts and submitted were not done properly. We've heard from many bankers that things were not done properly. So I would, if I were you, I would reach out to a professional, have them help you through the process, front to back end, through the, anything and everything that has to do with the entire loan process, the forgiveness aspect, et cetera. Make sure it's done properly. Make sure you get the proper amount of money that you're looking for. Reach out to your CPA. Maybe your CPA is willing to help you or has a program. We've developed a program for our clients who wanted our help to manage the entire process for them. It's a stressful and very frustrating and interesting experience thus far, dealing with all the different banks and everybody's different requirements, et cetera. But we are seeing a lot of them being calculated incorrectly by both banks and by doctors out there trying to do it themselves. So just a point, just a thought. But the answer is yes. You could apply. We've answered that several times. You could apply. Go to a fintech. Go to a community bank. Try and help that at that point in time. Do you think they will extend the 8-week time frame since most of our practices are not open? No, I don't think they're going to extend the 8-week time frame at all. I think the point of having the Paycheck Protection Program loan program available is to help businesses that were not closed, that were operating, still open, that were paying employees on payroll actively now, but had their revenues diminished because of the stay-at-home orders. So as an example, like a manufacturing company, right? Or a distribution company whose revenues had dropped 70%, right? But they still had the employees that were there, but they were making too much money. They were not making too much money on salary to apply and qualify for unemployment, but the business cannot afford to sustain them without laying them off. That was the point of the PPP loan. The point of the PPP loan was not to wait and say, okay, you can use it here in 2 months when your business is back open. One of the certifications on the application is that you need the funds to sustain the ongoing operations of your business. So it's hard to make that certification when your business is closed. So no, I don't think they're going to extend it by any means. The ADA's talked about it, but I am going to put money on that they will not get anywhere with that. We included profit sharing in our loan calculation for the PPP. How do we give profit sharing in the allowed 8 weeks? So we don't know for sure because we've not seen the details of the guidance yet from the Treasury, but what we're anticipating is going to happen is that the Treasury is probably going to allow for a calculation of 8 50-seconds, so 8 weeks divided by 52 weeks of your normal, what would be a normal calculated profit sharing contribution during that time frame. But sit tight and see what happens there. To be honest with you, we'll have to see what happens once the Treasury actually provides guidance. For loan forgiveness, do we need to run payroll within a certain time frame? You have 8 weeks from the date you receive the funds to be able to pay it out for payroll and rent, utilities, etc. If your employees don't want to come back, can I hire different employees? Yes, you absolutely can hire different employees if your employees don't want to come back. If my employees does not like to go back to work because they're getting more from unemployment, that's an issue that we're seeing all over the place. Technically speaking, once you offer for them to come back to work and they refuse, they've then refused to work, therefore they're quitting, essentially, therefore they're not eligible, technically speaking, for unemployment. We'll have to see how that shakes out. These $600 a week federal stimulus payments are interesting in that I think it was in South Carolina, somebody now makes $25 an hour. In Texas, they now make $28 an hour. So it's going to be hard for a dental practice with a $17, $18 an hour employee to get them to come back when they were making $26 or $28 an hour sitting on their butt at home without doing anything. So I think it'll be an interesting. I think we'll see the quality of our team members, whether or not they're actually team players or whether or not they're in it for themselves. I think we're going to see the quality of character of a lot of our team members come out here in the next 8 weeks or so. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. Okay. Okay. We're running low on time. I'm trying to look for some really good ones that we haven't covered.
There's a lot there, and I thank everyone for their questions. One thing, Drew, I'm going to ask you to do is put your contact information either in the chat box or at the end on a splash screen so everyone can see that. We have 100 questions in there, and we're going to schedule this again hopefully next week or the week following. But Drew, if you find one, go ahead, and there's some comments in here I can read while you're looking.
Okay, so
Dr. Dan said, this has been, it might help someone. I applied for the PPP to one bank and heard nothing. I applied to the second bank and it progressed well. Requested a check from the second bank for the PPP funds to try and get a little play. And when my 8 weeks would start, it arrived. The next time I checked the first bank, I'd received the PPP funds without signing a note. So his suggestion is request the PPP funds, and if you apply to more than one bank, confirm that you don't get two of them at the same time. So I guess that goes into applying to two banks simultaneously.
Yeah, which is interesting because if everything was done properly, your EIN number would be in the system, in the IRS's E-Tran system, so it would have kicked you out for the not allowed you to get two E-Tran numbers. So somebody says on 4/28, I received SBAD Treasury 310 for $2K, which was electronically deposited into my account. That's the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Grant, $2,000, $1,000 for every employee that you have. So that would have come without any kind of confirmation, any kind of discussion, any kind of communication whatsoever. So that's what the SBAD Treasury 310 amounts that you would have seen directly deposited into your bank in the last 2 weeks or so. Is it too late to apply to another bank now for PPP loan? No. Go to the fintech companies that we talked about. Go to a community bank is going to be your best option there.
Drew, here's one I want to read out. My understanding, it moved. My understanding was the PPP loan was to pay the employees even if they were staying at home. The purpose being that they would continue to meet their obligations, spend money, and spur the economy. That is why the loan is forgiven. We're going to have some employment attorneys on next week, but Drew, do you want to take that one? I think it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, which honestly, 100% agree with that. Now there's just so many unknowns there, and whether or not, and then on top of that, having the counterintuitive $600 a week stimulus payment, which brings the most front office and most assistants up over where they would have been making with the state unemployment plus the $600 up over the amount that they would receive if on normal payroll. So hygienists would be excited about it, but pretty much everybody else in the office team members are not super excited, which is so it just didn't really make a whole lot of sense, frustratingly. But
what about this one? Can they hire a family member to replace a team member that doesn't want to come back, and how do they need to verify the family member was actually there? And unfortunately, a lot of people have S corporations and have family members on payroll for a number of different reasons, and these family members couldn't tell you what the wallpaper looks like on the walls of the office or the paint color is because they never go there. What about hiring a family member if an employee doesn't want to come back?
Right, and that's where. So ultimately, I would say if they're indeed going to be there working in the office, I would say yes. I think that there's going to be a couple of areas that are going to require or are going to be subject to quite a bit of scrutiny. One is going to be like affiliated people through payroll and whether or not those dollar amounts were spent accurately and correctly and whether or not they're legitimate. And two, I think it's going to be lease amounts. And so doctors who own their own building who decide to double their rent for a couple of months, I think those amounts are going to come under pretty close scrutiny as well. So I'd be careful. You have to make sure that your your lease that was in force prior to February 15th is the exact same amount that you're still paying now. That would be the only concern there.
And there's a couple questions about the allocation of that money. Somebody said, can I pay them a bonus before they come back? And someone else asked, can I pay them past payroll using this PPP money? As far as the dissemination of this and attributing it to a certain time that they worked, is there any rhyme or reason to that?
No, and that's where, so it goes back to we don't know whether or not they're going to allow for back bills to be paid or not. And so really what I would probably do on the flip side is instead of paying them bonus before they come back, I would probably wait and pay them a bonus after they come back, just to make sure that you have the money and it's there and it's in the account and can be used for the rhyme and reason that you need it to be used for. And then on week 7 of your 8 weeks, if you know, hey, I'm going to have $10,000 extra dollars, is there anything I could do with that $10,000 extra dollars that makes sense? Like, here's a thank you to my team for all their hard work, for combat pay, right, so to speak, for coming back into the office. Reward your high performers that show back up on day 1 with a team spirit and a team playing attitude. I would probably do a bonus later as opposed to do one earlier on.
Perfect. And another one, I know you're looking at, is it true that the advanced EIDL money is not a grant? So it is and it isn't. I'll let you take that one.
It is and it isn't, right, correct. And so it is a grant if you don't receive a PPP loan, then you don't have to pay that money back. But if you do receive a PPP loan, the amount of the EIDL grant reduces the amount of the forgiveness that you're eligible for. So say that you're eligible for $50,000 forgiveness, your PPP loan is $50,000 and you receive the maximum $10,000 EIDL grant or advance. That means that on the PPP forgiveness, only only $40,000 of that is going to be eligible for loan forgiveness.
Perfect. Just so you guys have some context out there, we answered about 70 or 80 questions, and there's still 100 in the queue, and we just added 4 more. And the time I said that, we added 4 more. So I apologize, but Drew's trying to find some really good ones. They're all really great questions, but some real zingers out there of questions that we can answer for you. And I'm going to look through too. And Drew, I don't know how much time you have. I certainly appreciate this, and I don't want to. I want to let them know how
5 more minutes.
Okay. So if you want to go ahead and find some good ones and mark them, I'll find some good ones and mark them. And then anyone that we didn't get their question answered, I apologize, but Drew's going to put his contact information up there. And for the iTunes audience, I'm going to go ahead and spell out how to get a hold of Drew. So Drew, you find any good ones in there you want to address?
Yeah, there's a lot of these actually we've covered already before. One of the questions is, how do we calculate a full-time equivalent employee? We have many part-time employees. Does the number of employees matter, or just 25% of the total? As it comes to the full-time equivalent employees, that is going to be a measure of the loan forgiveness, one of the factors to consider within the loan forgiveness application and specifics itself. We're waiting to see what's going to happen there once we get the SBA, the Treasury guidelines for the loan forgiveness. It'll probably detail out either A, it's about the FTEs and how it's going to be calculated, or B, what to consider for the number of employees that have to be employed on June 30th. HOA fees. What about HOA fees? Is that lumped in with the rent? So that would be, I guess, if you own like a condo. So if your office was in a condo park and you owned your condo and your common area amounts or whatever it may be, that would be lumped in with rent. Just like your utilities would be separate, but your common area maintenance and your HOA, that's things that are included in your commercial lease. That's what that's looking for there. A fantastic question.
Drew, as far as applying twice for the EIDL with the SBA, some people have gotten fraud alerts for just small little things. If they see you come up twice for the SBA EIDL, are you afraid that would trigger a fraud alert and put you into a queue that's never going to get answered, or would you apply twice?
Yeah, I mean, if you've already, so you can't apply anymore for the economic injuries assessment. As of a couple of days ago, I've not checked in a couple of days, but they've shut their portal down for now. due to funds being allocated, or they're imagining they're going to be out of the funds at this point in time. But so I would.
If you could, and double PPP, could that trigger a fraud alert if they show you showing it twice with two different banks?
I doubt it, because I think what's going to happen is you're going to get your E-Tran number from the first bank, and then the second one is going to apply. And once, if they ever get to it, right? Frankly, if a big bank ever even gets to it, then it's going to be kicked out because it's already going to show an E-Tran number for your EIN in the system. Let's see, we answered a lot. Yeah, we answered definition of utilities. What's the definition of utilities? So phone bill, cable, internet, transportation actually falls under that. Gas, electricity, water, your typical utilities. Security system very well may even fall under it. I think what we're going to find is that when it comes to the Treasury's guidance, we'll see a lot more of the detail there, but that's kind of the high level. So things that telephone, cable, internet, water, electricity, gas, transportation expenses, etc. in there. So great question. Thank you so much for that.
And Drew, sorry, the questions keep coming as we go, and preemptively, I want to tell everyone I apologize. We're not going to be able to
like
answer
105.
So. It's like a video game. Every time I feel like we knock out 3 or 4 questions,
right.
They come right back in.
Yes.
So it's fun, but preemptively, we're not going to get to all your questions. I definitely apologize. Drew, you do have a kind of a newsletter with your frequently asked questions that you disseminate, weekly or daily, or do you have any way that they can sign up to be on part of your mailing list or your FAQs that come out?
Yes, we do. We had created a form specifically for that. Let me find that. I'll put that in the chats. Okay.
Okay, and I'll do a couple more statements while we're doing this. If you want to go ahead and put that in.
Sure.
Can I use the PPP funds for group health medical insurance? Drew, my interpretation of that is yes, you can use it for retirement, health insurance, and payroll. PPP, is that correct?
Definitely. Yep, absolutely. You can definitely use it for any kind of payroll-related costs, including group health insurance, including retirement expense, including payroll bonuses, etc.
Another one says, are they still processing EIDL grants? All my colleagues received theirs, but I have not received anything or heard from them since. So I don't think they're taking any new applications, but you should have gotten a login to see your status. You should be able to log into the SBA portal and see your EIDL status. And I would suggest you do that, because if there's something that they misunderstood or they declined it, you can contact them and rectify it. I actually called on my EIDL, and I was very, very surprised that I had an accountant on the other end of the phone within, I held no less than 20 minutes. So if you haven't received your EIDL from the SBA, find your login, and you should have one, and then call them, and they can help you out. Drew, do you concur?
Yeah, so if you call them, especially if you have your authorization number, that's what you're going to need, is your authorization number. So if you call them, you can find out. But as far as I know, they are still processing those economic injury disaster loan advances, the grants. And like I said, everybody that we filled them out for has received it at this point in time, as far as I know. But we were doing it the very first night, the night of March 29th through really through Tuesday the 31st, that have received them in the last week and a half or so, 2 weeks maybe. So we don't, as far as I know, they're still processing them. As far as I know.
Perfect.
But you can, surprisingly, you've been able to get it. A lot of people have been able to get a hold of the SBA. Surprisingly, I would have think that they would not be able to, but surprisingly, they have been able to. So.
I was very surprised. It was within 10 or 20 minutes, and it was an accountant. I was very surprised. He was very nice to me, and I was very nice to him, because I was just floored that they were being so accommodating, and they had an accountant they had hired somewhere back east to help with all these calls. Yeah.
Okay, so here's another good question that I want to, and this is a good question. I've applied for the PPP and EIDL loan, but I haven't heard from either. So my sister is willing to lend to me. In the meantime, can I pay her back after using the money with either of the other two? No, you cannot. And so there's specific requirements. You can't refinance debt, right? With either of these loans, you cannot finance an existing debt that is outstanding. The PPP loans proceeds can only be used for proceeds during the 8-week period, specifically related to payroll, rent, utilities, mortgage interest. But if you've borrowed money from somewhere else in order to float it for this 6-week period, you cannot use the PPP or the EIDL loans in order to pay that loan off. You have to pay that loan off as you normally would. You can use the PPP funds to pay for that 8-week period, and you can use the EIDL funds. If you receive an economic injury disaster loan, you can use that for funds after your PPP time frame runs out, is what I would recommend there. So you cannot use these loan proceeds to pay off existing loans, another loan that you've taken out. So, okay, how's that?
Yeah, that's great. We've run for quite some time, and the questions keep coming in. So I apologize to every single person that came on and put their questions in and it didn't get addressed. The one thing I can tell you is that Drew has his link in the chat for his COVID-19 updates. And I don't know, Drew, do you do some FAQs in there so everyone kind of gets a similar message?
Yeah, if you go to our website, actually, and at the very top you'll see a banner that says COVID-19 updates, and there's some FAQs that are in there. And that it's been a week or so since we've updated any of those, but we'll continue to update those as pertinent things happen. Like the next big thing is going to happen is once the Treasury guidance is released. Once the Treasury guidance is released, we'll update those to include Treasury specifics as to the Treasury guidance itself. So.
Excellent. And not a solicitation, but definitely an endorsement. I do know a lot of your clients have been very happy with how proactive you guys have been in helping them prepare, especially apply for the PPP. I heard the most prepared people with a rapport with their accountants are able to get that information into the queue pretty quickly and have a better chance of getting that accepted. Is that pretty accurate?
Yeah, we had all of our clients that wanted us to manage the process for them. We had everything queued up and ready to apply by submitted to the bankers, et cetera, by Sunday nights. That we could be ready to go Monday morning. So definitely.
Drew, someone asked what your website address is, and for the iTunes people, if you could give us both an email contact. I know you're going to get slammed if you give your personal email, but if you have an info or Q&A, and then the web address so they can find those FAQs on there.
If you visit the web address, if you visit our website at www.engageadvisors.com, so ENGAGEADVISORS.com, engageadvisors.com, you'll see a bar at the very top that's COVID-19 updates. So go there, you can click on that and be able to see some FAQ information. I'm putting this link here in the to sign up for our email list that will email notifications out from periodically every, probably I think it's been at least once a week on average. Some weeks it's been 2 or 3, but definitely sign up for that if you'd like. And otherwise, come back next week, probably. I imagine, hopefully we'll have the SBA guidance. The Treasury guidance next week. We were really hoping to for this week, for today, but we just, we can't control the government as much as we would like to, right, Jonathan?
No, yeah, and I wish we had exactly. When you and I talked before people came on the call, and I said, Drew, what's the updates? Do we have some breaking news we can feed them? And you said, very close, but nothing fresh off the press. But this has been fantastic. Now, I got to tell you guys, I feel really bad. I can see that Drew answered over 100 questions, and the queue still has over 100 questions in it. So I feel really bad, and I apologize to each and every one of you that put a question in the queue. There was no hierarchy of importance. It was kind of a first come, first served queue, and then we kind of scrolled through to try and pick things out, but it was very, very difficult. So you had great questions. It wasn't that it was a good question that we didn't answer because of that. It's just there was so many in there. And Drew, I thank you so much for taking all the time to answer all the questions you did.
My pleasure.
How does it feel being America's dental CPA?
That's quite the title there. I appreciate that. Yeah, we work with dentists all over the country. I think we've got 500 plus dentists in 40 some odd states at this point in time. So we work with people, dentists specifically. It's all we work with is dentists across the country. So happy to help in any way we can.
Yeah, I know you've got a really good team, and you're ready to onboard additional people if needed. I know everyone here, you might have an accountant you're working with, and it's not a solicitation to move you away from that accountant, but, someone proactive with these issues and someone that knows your profession is definitely important right now. So that being said, Drew, I'm going to give you a shot to give some parting words of wisdom for about 20 seconds, then I'll take it back and we'll wrap up the call. And again, I apologize to everyone here that didn't get their question answered.
Yeah, I would just, I think at this point in time, be patient. There's still a lot of volume with the banks. Be nice to your banker. Maybe deliver them donuts, coffee. Right? A lot of them need coffee at this point in time. But just be patient. And when it comes to utilizing these PPP funds, I would definitely wait to use them until we know what the game that we're playing looks like. We know what the details are, and then from there, be able to make sound decisions. To be able to use the funds wisely, maximize your forgiveness at that point in time, and go from there.
Drew, I appreciate it. I put my camera back on. I don't know if anyone out there can see it because I'm using my iPhone for the audio, but it's the Fireside Chat, and I've got the fireplace playing behind me. And
I need a fireplace in my office.
In a separate note, it's different. I'm here in Southern California, and the weather is so beautiful outside. It's just tough to deal with COVID. The first, 3 weeks it rained and it was kind of icky outside, and it was a little more easy to stomach. Now it's so nice outside. But, I appreciate it, Drew. Fireside Chat, if we could have you back, I'd appreciate it. We will take some of these questions and kind of consolidate some of the questions that are synonymous with one another so we can get some Q&As up front next time. Drew will address some of the most pertinent issues. Big crowd today, 300 people. Again, I appreciate it and apologize if we didn't answer your questions, but we will do this again. In the interim, appreciate you guys coming on. Be safe. Use this time for CE. Use this time to ask questions with professionals in the industry like Drew. Spend some time with your family. I've been getting messages from people saying, my kids are going to be confused when they go back to work because they've never seen anything like this from me.
The Corona vacation.
No, exactly, the Corona vacation. And, I teased one of my doctors. I said, your kids are going to say, Dad, remember that time that I was more important than work? And you stayed home for 8 weeks. That being said, Drew, thank you again. And we're going to go ahead and end the call now. And again, I apologize, but we'll have Drew on again, and we'll get all these questions taken care of. But thank you all for attending, and we'll see you soon.